Back in September, I took a trip to Portugal with Faizal and Matej, and on that trip, we prioritized photographing the city of Lisbon. Both Faizal and Matej actually have a lot of experience traveling internationally, but for me, this is the first time I've ever left the United States. The week we spent in the city of Lisbon was full of photography, countless footsteps, pastries, coffee, and obviously some good times. So in this video, I want to briefly recap what it was like to go on my first international photography trip and share my thoughts after visiting the beautiful, historic city of Lisbon. Matej and I took a red-eye into Portugal, and we met up with Faizal at the airport that first morning. We grabbed coffee at the airport, charged up our gear, and then we headed straight to the Airbnb. Of course, we obviously wasted pretty much no time at all when we got to the Airbnb. We just immediately dropped our bags off, so we wanted to head straight out the door and start exploring the city. On this trip, I really didn't want to set any major expectations for photos, especially on that first day. So for most of the afternoon, we kind of just went with the flow. I did do some research prior to this trip. So for that first afternoon, we did check out some spots that I had in mind. But again, we kind of kept it spontaneous for that first day. So for the first full day that we were in Lisbon, while Faizal and Matej slept in just a little bit longer, I got up early and went out to catch the first light in the morning. After shooting on my own for a couple of hours, give or take, met up with Faizal and Matej, and then we went to spend a couple hours in a neighborhood called Príncipe Real. I had a particular castle on my list of places that I wanted to visit. I'm not going to pronounce the name because it's probably going to be an embarrassing attempt, but it's on screen for you if you're curious which one it is. The next morning, the three of us woke up for sunrise to catch that first light. Alright, so really quick, I thought this would be a good little moment to talk about. So we got this beautiful church bell, something like that up there in the way top middle of the frame. And then we got this patch of light coming through this alleyway. And it's really cool because it creates kind of like two separate areas of interest. Now I'm just waiting for somebody to walk into the frame in that light and get it all together. See how it goes. By day 4, I was really running on just a few hours of sleep total for the trip. I was absolutely cooked. I needed to sleep, and sleep I did. We originally planned to take a day trip to this coastal town called CASCAIS, but the weather looked a little bit windy, so we decided to just push it to another day and have a slower day in Lisbon instead. On day 5, we finally had good weather and a window to visit the coastal town of CASCAIS that I've already mentioned. I'm actually going to do a separate video on this day trip just because out of all the days on the trip, it was probably the one where I got the most photos that I'm happy with, and I want to do it justice. So I'm going to do a completely separate video just on that coastal town. Day 6 was our last full day in Lisbon. By this point, we felt like we got a good balance between visiting planned, kind of researched spots and just exploring the city of Lisbon kind of aimlessly. One thing that we wanted to make sure that we did before we left Lisbon was grab a ferry ride. The three of us, a lot of times that we've shot together in New York City, try to get on a ferry. It's just a nice cap for the day. So we thought that this would be a really fitting way to kind of end our time in Lisbon. We chose a ferry that takes you across the water of the Tagus River over to an area called Almada. And we made it with plenty of time to walk along the coast and soak in the last couple hours of sunlight. This trip was the first time that I got to use the X-T5, both photo and video, and it made the hybrid shooting experience just that much easier throughout the trip. As for the trip to Lisbon itself, I do have some general takeaways about the travel experience. For one, traveling in Europe and being in Lisbon was just a lot easier than I expected it to be, especially since this was, again, my first time leaving the US. I was expecting language barriers, having trouble like ordering food, for example, payment issues, but honestly, I really didn't run into too much. And of course, I did have, two friends who are both well-traveled with me, so that's kind of a cheat code, but it wasn't as scary as I thought it was gonna be. And I kind of quickly realized that when we got to Lisbon, like within a few hours, I was just pretty surprised by how navigatable everything was, or at least felt to me. That said, what I will say is, and kind of alluded to previously in this video, street photography in a place that you're not from is definitely a lot more nerve-wracking than I realized it would be. So I think it would have taken me a lot longer to really settle into the street photography process there and feel comfortable taking the photos that I know I can take in a place like New York City or another United States city. That said, this trip was a lot of fun, and this was only the first half of the time that I spent in Portugal. I also spent a number of days in Porto. I also have that day trip to CASCAIS. Yeah, it was just a great trip overall. I'm gonna have more videos about this experience coming to the channel soon. If you enjoyed this, definitely subscribe. I appreciate you commenting what your favorite photo was. And yeah, I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks so much for watching. Peace.